Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the OMBGA public budget hearings. Actually, this evening will be our last evening with all departments completing their presentation. My name is Mallory Rosado. I'm the council president for the Court of Common Council for the City of Hartford. You can view us through Facebook Live. Channel 96 through Comcast TV. I will present my colleagues the order I see them on the screen for this evening. We have Councilman Sanchez, Councilwoman Rossetti, Councilman John Gale, and I believe Councilwoman Rossetti. And I believe that's it for council. Some council members are running a little bit behind, but will be joining us shortly. This evening, presenting, we have Corporation Counsel, followed by the Office of the Chief Operating Officer and the Mayor's Office. With that said, I am going to turn it over to our CFO, Ms. Jen Hockenhall. You have the floor.
Good evening, Council President and members of the Council. Thank you for having us again tonight. First tonight will be our Corporation Counsel, Mr. Howard Rifkin, and I will turn it over to him and share your slides.
Thanks, Jen. Good evening, everybody. Council President, members of the Council. We appreciate the opportunity to address you again this year on our 2022 budget. And with me is Deputy Corporation Counsel Alexandra Lombardi. We'll give a very short presentation and then we'll be very happy to answer any questions you might have. So this is briefly the mission of the Corporation Counsel. You can see that it's really about providing quality and timely legal assistance and advice to city departments, the city council, agencies, boards and commissions, etc. Our organizational chart's pretty straightforward. We have 15 authorized positions. We have 2 vacancies in the assistant corporation counsel position and 1 for an associate corporation counsel. Just to let you know, we are actively engaged in a new search for 1 assistant corporation counsel and an associate. We had conducted a search starting before the pandemic and then during the pandemic, and neither Alex nor I were completely satisfied with the responses we got, so we are going to search again for another position. But currently we have 11 active employees in the Corporation Counsel's office. Just the highlights are what's on the slide. I don't think there's anything in particular to say about that other than it has been, to say the least, a challenging year. And even though courts were, for the most part, shut down, there was a lot of legal work that was ongoing. There were still court hearings that were held remotely, and so I think that the amount of the number of cases that we had and the workload was equal to what we've had in other years, and to some extent because of COVID. And some of the work that we had to do around that, our workload was even probably greater. Next slide. Some strategic initiatives. We're really mindful about the balance between doing in-house legal work with the attorneys that we have and the paralegals we have, as opposed to use of outside counsel. We use outside counsel for a number of reasons, including potential conflicts of interest between our office representing the interests of the city and outside counsel perhaps representing the the interests of an employee of the city who may be sued. In addition to that, we will hire outside counsel when there is specific skill sets that we feel we need. For example, the litigation around the baseball stadium. We felt like we needed a construction law firm that could be the appropriate advocate in the trial process and the appellate process. The next slide. This is the one that I really wanted to focus on. Our budget is pretty much a current services budget. The decrease in the budget from FY21 to proposed FY22 is explained by the fact that we've transferred $200,000 from the Corporation Council budget to the COO's budget for the support of the newly created Office of Inspector General. And then the balance of the change is represented by the fact that we gave up one personnel count. It was an office assistant position. And so we went from 16 positions to a request for funds for 15 positions in FY22. Again, this really reflects the mission of the Corporation Council, and our budget is really reflective of personnel costs, which is really the 95% of the proposed appropriation or more. Thank you. And Alexandra and I are happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Corporation Counsel Rifkin, for that thorough, short presentation. It did really cover a lot. Just want to note for the record that Councilman Nick LeBron has joined us. And do I have any questions from my council colleagues for Corporation Counsel? Councilman Gale.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Corporation Counsel. I have a couple of questions, and the first one, I don't know if this is within your bailiwick or not. In our budget, we carry a line item for legislative services, $60,000, which I assume are payments for lobbyists, and I'm just wondering who the lobbyists may be, and I think at one point we had somebody lobbying for us at the federal side, and so just wondering if we have a breakdown, you know, that we have somebody at the state capitol and somebody in the feds, or what that line item represents.
Councilman Gale, I believe that Ms. Montanez will be able to address that. I think that appropriation or line item is in the cruise budget.
Okay, nice handoff.
It's my pleasure.
Second question, I see that year to date we've spent $985,000 on outside counsel, and I'm wondering if you could just identify who the three largest firms are that receive payment for us as outside counsel, and maybe the approximate amount.
I will have to get back to you on that. I'm sure that one of them is Mirtha Kalina / Carlton Fields. Attorney Leslie King represented us in the Center Plan versus City of Hartford case, both at the trial level and most recently before the Supreme Court in an appellate argument. She changed law firms during the course of this last fiscal year. So I'm quite confident that that is probably a good chunk, not all of it, but a good chunk of well over 100,000 in attorney's fees. My guess is that we probably Halloran and Sage may be one of the larger one of the three larger ones. We shifted a lot of work to them regarding foreclosures and blight liens and the like. And I don't know, Alexandra, do you have?
It would be a guess on my part. You know, I don't want to guess. We can run a report.
Well, yeah, you send it to us in an email if you would. That'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you. That's all I have, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilman Gale. Any other council colleague that wishes to address Corporation Council? Going once, going twice?
If you prefer, I can answer that question about the highest charges. This is Dave Beck.
That's great.
From Budget and Grants.
Of running the report.
Yeah.
Okay, Carlton Fields. I'm searching for a way to turn my video on while I'm doing this. Carlton Fields is 449,000 or thereabouts. Shipman and Goodwin is about 118,000. Jackson Lewis PC is about 114,000.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That concludes our presentation from Corporation Council. Thank you all. And have a nice evening. You're more than welcome to stay if you'd like. Next to present is our Chief Operating Officer, Thea Montanez. And for the record, I just want to say, I apologize, Ms. Montanez, that our Majority Leader, Councilman Clark, has joined us. Good evening,
okay.
Councilman Clark. Okay, you have the floor.
Great. Good evening, Council President. Good evening, members of City Council. I appreciate the time this evening to review our recommended budget for the Office of the COO. And so I'm just going to go ahead and get started with slide number 2, right? That just reminds everyone of our mission, which is that the COO serves as the principal managerial aide to the mayor. Part of that includes overseeing day-to-day municipal operations and the coordination of special projects and interdepartmental initiatives. So our priority always is to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of our city operating departments. The 3 strategic priorities that I'm going to share are specific, especially for the upcoming fiscal year. So the first is leading interdepartmental efforts to support the city's recovery from the pandemic for the benefit of our employees, residents, businesses, and visitors to the city of Hartford. The second is continue efforts to improve performance of our city departments, including significant projects that require interdepartmental collaboration. And the third is to expand our efforts to use data to inform decision-making throughout our operating departments. Slide 3, please. This is an organizational chart of the Office of the COO. So you will see there is the operations team. And so that is headed up by our Director of Operations, Nat Gale. He is supported by our operations manager, who is Maritha Braithwaite. And then within operations, there is the Division of Sustainability, which is led by Shubhra Kamli. Then there is the 311 help desk that supports our resident service center. And then, of course, our graphics and mail team. Aside from the operations, you'll see there are 3 additional divisions. These offices, similar to sustainability, work across several operating departments. So there is the newly created Office of Equity and Opportunity, and that is led by Ms. Karen Taylor. As you may know, there is the Inspector General role that we recently filled with an interim Inspector General. And that person is supported from an administrative perspective by the Office of Equity and Opportunity. The second division that you'll see there is the North Hartford Promise Zone, and that is led by Mr. Courtney A. Jackson. And the third is our Office of Reentry. And so I am very grateful to my team who is joining me this evening, who will be available to answer any questions if there are specific questions that some of you may have on the work that they are leading. But I am grateful to all of them for joining me this evening, as well as for all their hard work during the past year. I will speak to the fact, just to note that during this year, we welcomed 2 new members of our team, the first being Nat Gale as our Director of Operations, and the second being Ms. Karen Taylor, who heads up Equity and Opportunity. They are both Hartford natives. They are both proud graduates of the Hartford Public School System, and we're really happy to have them be joining us in our work at the city. Overall, there are 16 full-time employees that make up the office of the COO. Of those 16, 77% of them are women, 40% of them are African American, 30% are Latino, and 30% are other. Slide 3, please, or 4, thank you. So just some highlights from the past year, as you've heard over and over again throughout the budget hearings. This has been one of the most challenging years, not just for us here at the city, but throughout the city, right, due to the pandemic. And so, one of this office's priorities was to ensure that the continuity of government operations, municipal operations, were not disrupted. And that we continue our recovery efforts, not just through the pandemic, but also the cyber attack that occurred last September. If you recall, it was it was the worst cyber attack that the city had experienced. And so we were managing that in addition to the pandemic and ensuring that we were able to perform the core functions of government. So that was a major focus of ours during the past year. As I mentioned earlier, we established the new Office of Equity and Opportunity, formerly known as the Office of Human Relations. The third is, and this is a lot of the work that Nat Gale focuses on as a Director of Operations, right? Developing and recommending a $130 million CIP program, which included an update to the CIP policies and procedures. And I know last week, I believe Nat provided the council with an overview of our recommended CIP program. The fourth priority that we worked on this year was leading the planning of Hartford's Universal Legal Representation Pilot Program. If you recall, the City Council last year had allocated $100,000 towards this effort. This would enable the city to provide funding for those Hartford residents facing deportation. We would be able to provide them with free legal representation with this funding. Originally, we had anticipated we would be eligible to receive grant funds from a foundation that supports this type of work. We did apply during the past year. So there was a small core planning team that I worked in partnership with, and Councilwoman Bermudez was part of that team. We did submit that application, and unfortunately, we did not receive the funding. But with your support recently, I believe it was almost 2 months ago, you allowed us to continue to use those funds to support the pilot program that we have designed over the past year. And so we are really excited to finalize our agreement with the New Haven Legal Assistance Association, so that, again, we can provide free legal services, or they can provide free legal services to Hartford residents that are facing deportation. The next priority that we've been focusing on, and this has been a partnership between this office and Janice Castle and the Office of the Mayor under Community Engagement, is the development of a Love Hartford initiative. It's a resident engagement and neighborhood beautification program we have designed in partnership with the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. We're really excited to build off of the success of Love Your Block, which is a program that Janice has been leading for the past 2 years with foundation funding. That program has been very successful in providing our residents with funding to bring projects to life that'll help build and strengthen their neighborhoods. And so based on the success of that program, we expanded our efforts so that we will continue to offer the grants, but we will also find other ways in which we can reconnect our neighborhoods as part of our post-pandemic recovery efforts. So there will certainly be more to come on that effort. The next step here was overseeing the implementation of the citywide free Wi-Fi program that is ongoing. And I know that Cherie Snipes had shared with you the work that she's also been managing as part of our citywide Wi-Fi program last week. And the last, but certainly not least, priority that we've been focusing on within the office is leading the planning and implementation of the Hartford Civilian Crisis Response Team. I am happy to talk a little bit more about that. In fact, I can just give you an update now. I know there have been some inquiries from council during the past 2 weeks about the status of that effort. So as you know, in October, we had hired Patricia McIntosh, who is a social worker, formerly someone who worked at in a social work capacity at CCMC, the Connecticut Children's Medical Center. We brought Patricia on board to help us in this planning process or phase. Patricia has been with us since October. And so when we brought Patricia on, Mayor Bronin also convened an advisory group to help inform our planning efforts. Councilman LeBron was a part of that planning group representing the city council. We began meeting in the fall. There was a total of 10 persons that comprised the advisory group. They met throughout the fall and winter. And then in March, they presented Mayor Bronin with their set of recommendations. So during the month of April, and then we continue our work this month as well, both Patricia and I have been having discussions based on the recommendations of the advisory group. We've been talking with several city departments, including Health and Human Services, the Police Department, as well as ES&T. And we have been trying to think through how we can take some of these recommendations and operationalize them. So we've had to consider, given our current policies and procedures, how this proposed program would integrate into what it is that we do now. We've been talking through potential labor issues that might come up again based on some of the recommendations that were made. And we are in the process of actually drafting an RFP that should be coming out in less than a month that will invite agencies to respond to one of the recommendations, which is the formation of a group of community responders. So these would be persons, one of them being a licensed social worker that would go out into community when we receive calls through our 911 dispatch center for those persons that may be experiencing emotional distress. Depending on the type of call we receive, we will deploy these community responders to work with those persons that are in need of services. And we will also want to ensure that if there is follow-up that is required, that this team of community responders is doing that type of work that we are currently not set up to do. And I'm happy to answer more questions about where we are in that process. Slide number 5, please. So this is a highlight of the work that is transpired over the past year that is being done by our amazing team at 311. Again, given our transition to remote operations, the 311 team is normally inside of City Hall at our 311 center, but due to the pandemic, they have been working remotely and they have not skipped a beat the entire time. As you'll see from these numbers, there has been a lot of activity via 311. So it is great that people, are calling. As you'll see from the chart there, the majority of these calls are for information. About 93% of the calls are for information, and the remaining 7% are for calls for service that generate work orders. You will see that there is a breakdown of the type of services that are being requested by city departments. The vast majority of the requests that are coming in are specific to the public works. And again, there's a further breakdown about the other departments that are receiving requests for service. But again, the majority are for the Department of Public Works and Development Services. Overall, we received 77,000 information calls. There were about 5,300 calls that generated in work order requests from our city departments. And then it is definitely worth highlighting that the team not only did they respond to the calls they normally receive, but during the pandemic, they also began scheduling COVID-19 testing at the Arroyo Center And we are grateful to them for setting up those appointments that they also continue to schedule today. In addition to scheduling the COVID-19 test appointments, they have also arranged for Hartford residents about 380 rides so that residents have the transportation that they need to get vaccinated. So really, again, grateful for all the tremendous work that our 311 team has been doing. Slide number 6. The next division I'd like to highlight is equity and opportunity. Again, this is led by Ms. Karen Taylor. You will see a breakdown of the work that she and Kim on her team have been doing during the past several months, which include developing a strategic plan in partnership with several stakeholders, including, for example, our HR department. There's a close working relationship between the work that Karen does and our HR team. Also, one of the priorities has been for Karen to take on, the ADA coordinator role, and so she has done that as well as manage the ADA policy and grievance policy or process, excuse me. So all of that information is up to date and available on our website for the public. And the last is transitioning our EEOC work to the Office of Equity and Opportunity. As part of her, core functions, one of her major focuses was ensuring that our employees were able to complete their mandatory sexual harassment prevention training. And so we're proud to report that about 95% of our employees have done that. And so I also want to thank Corporation Counsel and, again, Human Resources for their support and our ability to meet that 95% number. In addition to that work, Karen and Kim have been supporting our boards and commissions. And also, a big priority of theirs during the past year was helping support the Civilian Police Review Board. And so part of that work included helping with the search for the Inspector General, as well as onboarding the interim Inspector General, and also supporting the work of the CPRB's new chair, and also helping facilitate the training that's required of those persons that are serving as CPRB commissioners. Currently, there are several programs and new partnerships that Karen is developing, both internally and externally. Currently, she has convened a working group that is helping us think about, celebrating Juneteenth and how do we do that as a community. And she's doing that in partnership with Janice Castle in the Office of Community Engagement. And she's also, again, been a part of a lot of different discussions that have been taking place throughout the city, again, both internally and externally, around the topic of diversity and inclusion. So we are very well represented by Karen. For the upcoming fiscal year, there are 3 main strategic priorities, and they're listed here. One is to continue to build out the Office of Equity and Opportunity in partnership with HR. The second is to create a communications plan, which will include regular reports, again, to provide an update to our community of the progress that's being made and the city initiatives that she is managing. And then the third is to continue to support our boards and commissions. Slide number 7, please. These are highlights from the Office of Sustainability. Again, this division is led by Shubhra Kamble. You'll see some highlights here. A big focus of this office has been on energy savings. And so we have started with our municipal facilities. So Shubhra continues to project cost savings related to facility energy and efficiency. She's been working in partnership with our energy broker to secure lowered energy rates, resulting in an estimated $1.5 million in a budgetary reduction in the next 4 years. She is also working very closely with many of our partners to also identify opportunities where residents can also benefit from energy savings. And so one of those projects or programs is the Solar for All program that she's been managing. There have been 160 installations since 2016, and program participants have saved an average of $1,000 per year. Given all the work that SHUBDA has been doing, we have been very proud to be the recipient of several recognitions, including being recognized as Most Improved City by the American Council for an energy efficient economy. We received an honorable mention from the U.S. Council of Mayors Climate Protection Awards, and the city achieved a silver status from CT Ride's Transportation Leaders Program. On the advocacy side, we supported state legislation related to the Transportation Climate Initiative and home energy affordability. And if passed, TCI would generate significant revenue for environmental justice communities and reduce emissions from the transportation sector. On the grant side, SHUBDA has done a phenomenal job during her time in sustainability of securing funding to support the work that she does. And one of those particular grants was able to support the purchase of about 240 educational books that we distributed throughout the community. There were also 50 new trees planted in Keeney Park, and there were 300 items that were added to our community tool library. And then in addition, there was about $100,000 in CDBG funding for a residential energy outreach expansion for energy coaches to help residents access funds and improve energy efficiency in homes, including rental units. For this upcoming fiscal year, SHUBDA's three strategic priorities within the Office of Sustainability is: one, expanding capacity to implement sustainability projects, across all city departments. Right now, SHUBDA works very, very closely with the Department of Public Works, but we think there are opportunities outside of the Department of Public Works for her to integrate our sustainability priorities into the work that they do on a day-to-day basis. The second is relaunching our residential weatherization and solar outreach efforts. And the third is scaling our city facility energy projects. Slide number 7, this is the work that Courtney Jackson has been leading. This is the North Hartford Promise Zone. And so as you'll see, there is the newly created Envision Center at the Parker Memorial Center. This Envision Center actually was a program funded by HUD that was a partnership between the Promise Zone, our Health and Human Services Department, and then the Department of Family, Children, Youth, and Recreation. So all three departments work together, and part of their efforts have resulted in producing webinar series throughout the pandemic with about 760 views. A lot of the content that was provided in this webinar series was about how do we support our residents and the needs of areas of health, housing, education, and jobs, employability, skills training. They also provided 50 meal kits per month to families as part of Food Share Meals giveaway. And they developed a grab and go program to provide toys, arts and crafts, and games to about 180 families. So a lot of great work that is happening at the Parker Memorial Center. Part of the Promise Zone, there are several areas of focus, one of them which includes improved access to quality, affordable housing. And so through the work that Courtney and his team have been leading, they were able to rehab 3 housing units with 1 additional house currently underway. In addition to housing, there is also a major focus on improving community safety. And you may recall a couple of years ago, we received a grant from the Department of Justice's Community-Based Crime Reduction Grant Program. We partnered with Blue Hill Civic Association in administering those grant funds. And so some major accomplishments from that partnership was an increase in the number of 311 requests that were coming from members of our Promise Zone community. The second was a Faith in Blue community event that took place. And the third was a cleanup effort on Barber and Judson Street that engaged 120 youth. On the grant side, Courtney continues to find funding opportunities, not just for the city, but also for many of our nonprofit partners that are supporting the Promise Zone community. One of those grants that we received was a REACH supplemental grant. It was focused on flu and COVID-19 vaccine, and we were awarded $200,000 for that effort. The second was the addition of AmeriCorps Vistas. So we currently will have a total of 7 full-time Vistas to support the work that Courtney does. And the third is new. It is actually a grant submission to the U.S. Department of Education. It is their Promise Neighborhood Grant, which actually that whole planning process was led by the Connecticut Children's Medical Center. There was about 15 nonprofit partners that supported that application, and our request is for $29 million over a 5-year period to help reduce barriers and increase access to learning and employment for those residents of the Promise Zone. So fingers crossed. It is a very, very strong application. The city has applied 2 times before for funding from this particular grant program, but just based on the strength of the application, I am optimistic that we have a really great chance at actually securing the grant this time. So we certainly will keep you posted. Lastly, there are 3 strategic priorities that Courtney has identified specific to Promise Zone. One is to increase the number of residents that are participating in our Envision Center programs and services. The second is aggressively pursuing federal grant opportunities like the Promise Neighborhoods grant that I just described. And the third is regularly convening our Promise Zone working groups. There are 5 working groups in total, each focused on a different area of focus. During the pandemic, it has been challenging, as you know, to convene groups that normally met in person on a regular basis. But we are excited again as we're able to gather again to reconvene our groups and figure out ways where we can build and strengthen coordination amongst working group members. Slide number 9, thank you. And last but not least, this is our Division of Reentry Services, which is led by Sue Gunderman. There was a lot of work that was done, especially during the pandemic, in order to support those persons that are returning home from incarceration. As you know, we are the very proud home here in City Hall of our Reentry Welcome Center. And so due to the pandemic, the center itself had to close to walk-ins. Normally the center is open Monday through Friday and folks can walk in to meet with staff, but they were unable to do that. And so Sue was able to work in partnership with Community Partners in Action, who actually manages the center and the program, to help figure out other ways they could respond to the needs of those seeking services. And so there was continued coordination with the Department of Corrections so that we were able to receive persons that were coming home and help them make their transition. As you can see, I kind of with the other, the 2 points there, I just spoke to some of the work that they did, including providing cell phones, again, for those persons that were returning home and in need of support. 2 areas of focus that are priorities within reentry: housing and employment. And so Sue met with 11 local employers to promote and create second chance hiring opportunities. Overall, or actually since March of 2020, there were nearly 100 people that were referred by the Department of Corrections Reentry Housing Assistance Program. These individuals were identified by the Department of Corrections as homeless or housing unstable prior to the release, and they were able to find shelter in our community. And then last but not least was the formation of a monthly working group through the Reentry Council to address issues around housing, which continues to be a major challenge for us and is something that we're going to focus on for the upcoming fiscal year. On the legislative side, we've continued to support legislation around anti-discrimination, clean slate, and tax incentives for employers and other barriers that directly impact individuals with a criminal history. And with regard to strategic priorities for the upcoming fiscal year, we will continue to try to find employment opportunities for those folks that are returning home from incarceration and begin to build out a pathway to a career here with the city of Hartford. The second is partnering with our local community providers to do Greater Hartford, the Greater Hartford Reentry Job Fair in the spring of 2020. That is a job fair that we have done in the past. Again, due to the pandemic, we were unable to do or host the job fair, but we're really excited about hosting it for next year. And last is continuing to work with our partners to facilitate safe and stable housing options for residents returning home. Slide 10 just talks, again, it's a budget comparison, right? So for FY21, the budget for the Office of the COO was about 1.36, and we are recommending a budget of about 1.65. That is about a $280,000 difference, or a 20.5% increase. There are three things that are attributing to that increase. One, Corporation Counsel has already spoken to in his presentation, which was the transfer of $200,000 from their office to the Office of the COO to fund the Inspector General and the Assistant Inspector General, which is within the Office of Equity and Opportunity. The second is funding to support the addition of a new constituent services representative for 311. During the past 5 years, one of our major priorities has been trying to encourage our community to utilize 311 as much as possible for either information or city service requests. The great news, and you just saw from the numbers that I shared, is that people are doing that. So with the increased call volume, there is increased demand. And so hence the reason we're adding another staff person so that we're able to respond to calls quickly. And the third point there that makes up that increases for this year is a small salary increases for some staff to make salary align with their position responsibilities. And that is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Ms. Montanez, for that thorough, excellent presentation. I do want to acknowledge, I know that Councilwoman Bermudez joined us a while ago. Good evening. And Councilwoman Bermudez, you just had your hand up, so you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. We really appreciate it. It was very thorough. And thank you for all that you do for our community as well.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions in reference to the process for questions, the process of questions during the budget presentations. Typically, when we started off the budget process this May 3rd, the standard has been to allow city council members to ask 3 questions to department heads for sake of time, and being mindful that there are a lot of presentations and there's a lot of information. So being mindful of time. And then if there are more questions than that, certainly council members can send an email to department heads to receive additional answers. Sometimes, the rules are bent a little bit. If a presentation is shortened, and we could easily, one council member will ask six questions. But anyway, so the question is, myself and Councilman Josh McDum sent questions over to the police chief on April 28th. So before starting the budget process, April 28th was when we sent the questions over to him. On May 3rd was the date when the Hartford Police Department presented, when the chief of police presented. And during that meeting, I referenced that we had sent an email with the questions beforehand. So we didn't expect him to answer the questions there because there were a lot of questions. Sure. And so he referenced that he had received the email and that he would be getting back to us the following day, which I was like, oh, wow, the following day, that's amazing, because there were a lot of questions. But then we got a follow-up email from the chief on May 3rd, on May 5th, after the May 3rd presentation. And he indicated the following by email to us. He said, all questions by council members are submitted to COO and Director of Management and Budget by each department head. The department heads answer the questions and submit them to COO and the Director of M&B for review before responses are sent to council. That process is ongoing. So that was the last that we heard from the chief of police in reference to the questions that we had that were very specific.
Yes.
Some of the questions were answered during his presentation when he presented on May 3rd. Some of the questions were not. And so, and the reason why I'm bringing it up is because he referenced the COO. And so can you give us a little more insight in terms of that process?
Sure, I'm happy to elaborate. And, I know Jen Hockenhall, our CFO, is on the line too. It's my understanding that the process for city departments responding to city council questions during the budget planning process, right, is discussed amongst the council, I believe council president, as well as the CFO, right? And so they agree on what the process is for submitting questions. It's my understanding that the questions are to be directed to the CFO, and then she works in partnership with the department head to gather the information and then share it with the council. We do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, many times the questions that are being asked of our department heads are budgetary, financial in nature. And so some of that information our budget team has, and they're able to answer on behalf of the department head. The second is, we receive multiple questions from multiple city council persons. And some of those questions are duplicative, just because, city council members may not know that one of their council colleagues is also interested in getting the answer to the same question, right? So by directing all of the questions again to the CFO and the budget team, they're able to determine which questions are duplicative and which are not. And then they like to provide answers to as many council members as possible who may be also interested in knowing what the answers are. Specifically with the questions, Councilwoman Bermudez, to the police department, I know that Jen and her team were answering some of those questions because a lot of them were financial in nature, right? So they had answers for those questions. And then there were a couple of questions that were not specific to the police department. And I'll confirm one of the questions was specific to snow removal. And so there were questions about the number of infractions that the police had issued because snow was not removed as per our city ordinance. That question was better answered by the Department of Public Works, who have during our winter season taken on that responsibility. And then there was a question that was specific to 911 calls for service and the types of calls I think that might be coming into 911, where maybe there was a call that involved a person with a weapon, I think what it was. Nonetheless, that particular question, we asked Sue Webster, who heads up our 911 dispatch center, we asked her to provide answers to that. So I believe what Jen may be waiting for is for responses from both DPW and ES&T, so we can include those responses in the document with the questions that you shared.
Okay, so then the time frame that we'll be receiving the responses will occur before we reconvene next Wednesday?
Absolutely. Jen, I know you're joining us.
Can I chime in for a minute? So I have had conversations with our CFO, Jen Hockenhall. I've also had conversations with Chief Doty, and I just got off the phone with David. The committee of OMBGA has sent out numerous emails to all council members stating to forward their questions to Councilman Clark, myself, and our staff, so that we put together an email or send over your questions to the CFO, so that we wouldn't have repetitious questions, and that all council members knew exactly what questions each council member had, to be mindful of other department heads and their staff, so that they wouldn't duplicate answers. So if there is any confusion about Chief Doty not responding back on time or on various things, I am going to take responsibility for that. I don't know how many questions were sent over by Councilwoman Bermudez, because you did not share those questions with us.
We sent them over to Chief Thody and to Jen, and also the COO was copied as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask that if you have any other questions that you're sending over to any department, to please share them with us. That way we can look at those questions and make sure that we're not duplicating them. So I just wanted to say that for the record, going forward. So what we'll be doing tomorrow is compiling all the questions by council member, by department, and we will send that email to Jen, and Jen will send it to the various departments and make sure that no question is duplicated. Okay, thank you. You may continue, Councilwoman Bermudez, with your questions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so my questions were directed to that because we sent the questions before we started these budget presentations for sake of, number one, time, and number two, because we didn't want there to be a long period of, if you're going to present, you know, if directors are going to present on their budget, then it would be great to have that as part of the presentation. So that's why we sent them on April 28th, shortly after we received the mayor's recommended budget and the itemized budget.
Okay.
But yeah, so thank you for your presentation. My questions were directed to that, to the questions and the process of submitting the questions, because in previous years we've gotten the responses sooner from the Hartford Police Department.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Again, I as Council President indicated, we should be able to have those responses to you. I think there was a total of 45 questions that were directed to the police chief. So, you know, again, in some of the responses required responses from 2 other departments. So we'll certainly get all of that information to everyone.
Thank you. And thank you for those questions, Councilwoman Bermudez. And for the record, I just want to reiterate that tomorrow, you know, Councilman Clark and I will review questions from all council members, and we will send one email with all questions, and we will share that email, you know, with all council members, and we'll CC our CFO. And so that way everyone can look at the questions that were submitted by what council member, and then wait on a response from the departments. Are there any other questions? Councilman LeBron, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Madam President. Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank you for your efforts at the city, your knowledge of all the levels of processes and systems, and every department is like far beyond, like, I don't know how you men do it, but thank you for being a resource for me personally, and I'm sure my colleagues as well. So, and also thank you for this presentation. So I am the council person that probably has been egregious in going over my 3 questions, but I just have 3. I wrote them down specifically, so it's only going to be 3. So the first one is in regards to the pilot program for our new American families. How many families have we assisted over this past year?
So we have not implemented this pilot program. During the past year, we developed the program design. We submitted our application to the foundation, the Vera Institute, for their consideration. They then notified us that we did not receive the grant funding. And so then we requested the council consider allowing us to still pursue the program. And I believe you provided the necessary approvals maybe 2 months ago now, maybe. Since then, we have been working with the New Haven Legal Assistance Association to draft an agreement, right, that spells out what the terms of our partnership. Corporation Counsel is currently reviewing that draft agreement. I anticipate their review will be completed in the next couple of weeks. And it is my hope that we will be able to begin helping, again, those residents facing deportation by June. But I will certainly keep you updated on our progress.
So just piggybacking off of that question. So I think it's like still on the same one question.
Sure.
What's the intent and the design? Once the program is designed, is there an understanding of like how many is intended to be served in a year, or, or is it just something that we're going to have to wait and see?
So it is been difficult to try to confirm the exact number of residents we're able to assist, because each of them may have, there may be different legal circumstances, right, that will impact the amount of funding and legal services that they will need. So we anticipate that at least we'll be able, I mean, it's $100,000 in funding. We know right now that New Haven Legal Assistance Association since 2018 has been providing free legal services to Hartford residents, even though they are physically located in New Haven. They have been helping residents throughout the state, including Hartford residents, which is how we connected with them. And I think at the very least, they'll be able to help at minimum 20 Hartford residents. But again, that's all contingent upon the complexity of their case.
Makes sense. Thank you very much. Second question, in regards to the Wi-Fi program, we spoke with Director Snipes, and she said, I believe that it's fully running in the Northeast, 06120, and in the Frog Hollow neighborhoods. Are there any kind of marketing efforts or any kind of marketing plan to let the community know overall, at least in those neighborhoods, to promote that?
Yeah. So one point of clarification, we are not completely live in both of those neighborhoods. We're almost there. There have been a couple reasons why we haven't been able to activate Wi-Fi sooner in those two neighborhoods. One of the reasons has been the ability to receive the technology that we need to install in order to go live, right? And so there are about 3 or 4 different pieces of technology, and there have been huge issues with delivery just because there are back orders. And so we've been slowly receiving our deliveries. And in fact, there was one particular piece of equipment that we were waiting on that recently came in 2 weeks ago. So that's good. The second has been the weather. There's been a lot of rain, and when it's raining, we're unable to have our team of installers go out to install the technology on the utility poles. So that's, slowed us down. There is also COVID, and at one point it certainly has gotten better, but at one point a couple of months ago, one of our partners that installs the technology had an outbreak, so their employees were not available to install the equipment, so there was a delay because of that. But we have been continuing to make progress. We are focused on the Northeast and Frog Hollow. Frog Hollow, I just received an update on Monday, and it appears as though we're almost fully live, which would be tremendous news. And Northeast, again, we're still, I believe, waiting for a couple of things to happen before we're able to announce that they're live. Our intentions are, once we are up and running in those two neighborhoods, certainly. Thank you so much. I appreciate you asking this question of how are we promoting that. I think there's probably multiple ways we can do that, especially through the Hartford public school system, right? And we would, love to partner with the city council to help us get the word out as well.
Thank you. Okay, and then the last one is Majority Leader Clark and Councilman Gale put in a resolution, I believe, earlier this year regarding Juneteenth and the wantingness of having Juneteenth as a holiday, and it has come to my committee, and then on Karen Taylor's slide, you had that she was managing things and the vision. Would it be safe to say that Ms. Taylor is the one that's quarterbacking the Juneteenth initiative, or is this an HR thing, or is it a combination? How is that?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. It is a combination of things. So Mayor Bronin would like to make Juneteenth a city holiday. We are in the process of talking to each of our bargaining units, because it is a benefit that we would have to negotiate. So we are in active discussions with them. And we will certainly notify you once we're, able to receive the necessary approvals. And then the work that Karen is doing is really about how do we as a city, as a community celebrate Juneteenth. And so, that may be either weekend long or day long activities that are celebrating, art and culture. And that's the work she's doing in partnership with Janice in the Office of Community Engagement.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Majority Leader Clark.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam President, through you. Thea, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for your presentation. Very thorough, and I expected nothing less. We go back a ways, so it's,
we do. VHS a lot.
That's right. Really question, piggybacking off of Councilman LeBron's question regarding Juneteenth. I saw that there was some programs that are going to be playing around that. Definitely excited to hear more about that. I would just want to say it's good to hear that you are actually trying to bargain with the unions regarding that. I particularly will be a proponent of an additional, how many paid city holidays do we have? Is it 12?
12, I believe.
So I would be a proponent of this being a 13th one. So I just wanted to put that out there. And if either through your office and HR can do some type of cost analysis as to what it will cost the city to shut down on that additional day, that would be great.
Sure, I can follow up.
Okay, and also too, regarding the North Hartford Promise Zone, our baby, as I can say. How engaged are the communities within the Promise Zone areas regarding more development and more other initiatives taking place? Do you see a lot of synergy behind that? Remember, let me just piggyback. Remember where there was a lot of excitement when the Promise Zone still came in? I just wanted to know from your office's perspective, is there still a lot of excitement regarding trying to get things developed within the Promise Zone? In addition to that, are there any additional federal funds available since this was a 10-year designation, and since we do have a new president, is that designation still intact?
So I will let Courtney speak to the question about, community engagement. And, well, I can just tell you, I spoke just 2 weeks ago to Ms. Helen Nixon that reiterated her commitment to supporting the work of the Promise Zone. And just based on the conversations I've had with her and other North Hartford residents, right, there still absolutely is that interest in the work. But Courtney, do you want to speak further to that?
Yeah, I think the commitment from our partners, the commitment from the community is there. There's a ton of excitement. We did go through a super dry period where the opportunities to use Promise Zone preference points to bring in funding, it basically all but disappeared for the last 4 years. And we're already seeing more opportunities becoming available. And a lot of those things, as far as excitement, come along with when you have the resources to build. So for the past couple of years, it's really been focusing on leveraging existing resources, creating meaningful partnerships within providers, and really trying to stretch every single dollar. I think at this point, there's definitely a ton of excitement around just more opportunities being available. And I think we can really start to push some of our partnerships that we have to the forefront now. So it's actually a really exciting time with the transition as far as the new administration.
Thank you. That's excellent news. And I look forward to re-engaging with the health working group as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Majority Clerk. Councilman Sanchez, followed by Councilman Gale. Look, who do we have there?
Yes. Thank you for your presentation, and I must say I commend you and your office for handling the situation with COVID. coordinating everything with other departments to help the community in our city, as well as folks coming in from other towns. So great job, hard work.
Thank you, Councilman.
Absolutely well done. I just want to piggyback off Majority Leader Clark's question. With the opportunity zone, is the enterprise zone still in effect, which is the Windsor Street area? And does that intersect with each other?
Sure, that's a great question. I do believe the enterprise zone designation does exist. We have talked about it in the past about ways that we can leverage the enterprise zone with other designations like opportunity zone and the promise zone, right? There's a lot of zones and they all have different benefits to them. And so I think that's part of the work that Courtney will be doing in partnership with our Department of Development Services, right? Is to figure out how do we stack these various designations so we get the most benefits that we can from them.
Okay, and then now there was a recent purchase of the Fuller Brush building, right, on North Main Street.
Yes.
Right, so now is that on the grand list at this moment or not?
I believe so.
Would that be new revenue?
I believe so. I believe that property was once owned by the state of Connecticut. I believe it was the Department of Labor. And there is a new owner. So I would assume they are, not a nonprofit. They are not a state entity, right? So I would believe that would be added to the grand list, but I certainly will follow up with the tax office to confirm.
Right, I would like to know what type of new revenue we're going to receive from that. It's a large property, so from that property. And I would also like for council to receive any information on what are the plans for that area.
Sure.
If there's retail condos, entertainment district, or what have you. And I'd like to see, because I think one of the important things that we should all be focusing on, sooner than later is how are we going to lower the mill rate so that especially our small businesses can have a better opportunity to survive for a longer period of time rather than shut down during a pandemic like what we just had last year. We lost a lot of businesses. So if there's a way where we can increase new revenue to help us decrease the mill rate, I think it would be a win-win. Thank you. And thank you again, you and your team.
Thank you, Councilman. I will be sure to ask Charles Matthews, the Director of Development Services, to follow up regarding the Fuller Brush building. I know he has been working very closely with the property owner on their plans for that property. And so I'll make sure that he provides you all with an update.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Gill, followed by a follow-up question from Majority Leader and Councilwoman Rossetti.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, COO Montanez. Just to follow up real quickly on the Juneteenth matter, my vote is slightly different than Councilman Clark's. I support Juneteenth as a holiday, but I'm fine with eliminating Lincoln's birthday and adding Juneteenth so that we stay at 12 holidays. My questions, though, you heard me ask Corp Counsel the question, so I don't know if you know the answer, but I was just wondering with respect to legislative services, who we have and what they're doing.
Sure. Legislative Affairs is managed by the Office of the Mayor, and Vas Srivastava will be providing an answer to that question. So forgive me, it kills me to punt that, but that does not fall within the office of the COO. That would be the Chief of Staff.
This sounds like a rugby game.
I feel badly, John, that I can't answer that question, but that really is within the office of the mayor.
That's fine, no problem. Second question, and this has come up a couple of times during the budget deliberations. Council members, we never know when RFPs are issued, and I know one or more, at least one council member, if not more than one, has asked that we be given email notice whenever an RFP goes out. One of the things I don't know is, are we issuing an RFP daily? Or are we issuing an RFP, in the course of a year, do we issue 100 RFPs? So maybe you could tell us, approximately how many RFPs does the city put out, but also, is it likely and feasible that when an RFP is issued, council could be sent an email letting us know that an RFP has just gone out?
Sure. So, RFPs, right, requests for proposals are managed through our procurement division, which is falls under the office of our CFO. I too work very closely with procurement. I would say that, I would not be shocked if there were over 100 RFPs that the city issues on an annual basis. We have a software system in place that our businesses can register. And what they do is they fill out, some simple questions about, who they are and who the main point of contact is. And then they check off those specific goods or services that they may be able to provide. So when an RFP does get released, they automatically get an email notification that an RFP has been released that they may be interested in, right? I will follow up with Matt Larson, our procurement director, to confirm if there's a way that instead of selecting specific RFPs, if we can just provide contact information for all of council, and that way the software system will automatically ensure you receive a copy of every RFP that we distribute.
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
The last question I have is something that came up in discussion with the treasurer. The treasurer's budget includes somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 positions that are not funded within the general fund, but are funded through the MRF or the OPEB. And I asked the treasurer if those numbers are available anywhere in the budget book. I'm not sure the treasurer really knew the answer. He seemed to indicate that the numbers might be on the treasurer's website, but in any event, I do believe he's going to get us the answers. But I'm wondering, page 5-7 of our budget book is all funds expenditure budget summary. I've kind of assumed that page includes every dollar bill that's spent anywhere from any source that supports something in the city of Hartford. So I guess my question is the treasurer's funding from the MRF, is that money to be found in page 5.7? And if it is, where do we find it? And if it isn't, how do we find that number? Seems like we ought to have that number so we know what's being spent.
Sure. I will have to defer to Jen Hockenhall, our CFO. Jen, do you have an answer for Councilman Gill's question?
Councilman Gill, that is a terrific question. And I'll be honest, I'm looking at it now, and it would fall under the benefits and insurances if it was part of this information, and I don't see anything in there. So let me get back to you on that question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And this is not a question. I will just end by saying I also support Councilman Sanchez's statement that we desperately need to do something about the mill rate in this city at some point in time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilman Gill.
Thank you, Councilman Gale. Councilwoman Rossetti, followed by Councilman Clark.
Thank you. First of all, COO Montanez, great job.
Thank you.
Another great woman in the city of Hartford. Thank you. So, not that it's a big thing, but on page 15-3 of the budget book, and just because in my day job, we're kind of rethinking how we do everything. Under program services goal, graphics and copy services, meet the large volume copy and printing needs of the city. I know how much paper we go through, and I know how expensive it is. And I'm wondering, do we have a strategy, expensive and also, ecologically,
sure,
whatever. I know it's small, but it's also just a piece of many things that we could knit together that can bring the cost down. Do we have a strategy or thought on how we can use less. I went in and got my mail recently. I only say that because, and it was just, you know, people also knew we weren't there, so maybe we shouldn't even been doing mail, but you know, just my thought.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Part of our goals as a city is to reduce waste, including any sort of paper waste. I think the challenge is recognizing that many of our residents don't have access to technology, right? So they're not always able to receive emails or electronic copies. And so we try to figure out like, what is that balance? I think, you know, in terms of cost saving opportunities, I believe the CFO's budget this year, the recommended budget is proposing the addition of an employee who is solely focused, right, on trying to find ways that we can reduce costs and improve efficiency. And I think this could be one of those areas that we could have this person explore. And
I'm probably residents, absolutely, but I'm probably talking about more, internal staff and yep. Taking a pledge to, starting with myself, I don't need the paper, or, we'll do it electronically, that kind of thing. I don't know what that is, but yep. Just throwing that out there. So thank you very much.
I appreciate the suggestion. I certainly will follow up with Shubhra. I think, again, given the work that she does and her partnership with the operating departments, this could be a goal for us as a workforce.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rossetti. Councilman Clark.
Thank you, Council President, through you. Just actually to follow up on a couple of the questions of my colleagues. I believe regarding at the 3580 Main Street, which is the old Philip Rush building, they have presented plans before the Northeast NRZ, which the Northeast NRZ is fully in support. And I do know that there is already businesses operating inside of that building. And there is going to be housing that is going to be developed inside of there. And so I would recommend that this be, as COO Martinez indicated, go through Director Matthews, as well as our Chair of Planning, Economic Development and Housing, Councilman Surgeon, to get a meeting together to discuss some of these plans. Again, these plans are already underway, and I'm all for reducing our mill rate, but it's going to take a significant investment in order for our city to have a reduction in the mill rate. So one commercial building like this is not going to reduce the mill rate, but we're going to need more development, which is going to take more subsidies to do that. Also, too, in conversation yesterday with the in our budget hearings with the treasurer, I believe he indicated that the information needed is on the website regarding the pension commission, and all expenditures, and correct me if I'm wrong, CFO Hockenhall, on the pension fund is not a general fund item. So that's probably why it's not founded in our budget book, because those expenses are not out of the general fund. And anything related to expenditures out of our city's budget is coming from the general fund, which is in the book.
That is true. Yeah, I believe Councilman Clark, I think on that page 5-7, I think the wording just might need to be tweaked a little bit to say excluding pension funds. We say that on quite a few other documents, but we'll circle back to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from my council colleagues? Going once, going twice. Thank you, Ms. Montanez and your team, for a great job and a thorough presentation. Looking forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening. Thank you.
Good evening. Next and final is the mayor's office.
Hello, everybody. Council President, members of the City Council, thank you so much for your patience. I'm very glad to present our budget to you. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Do you all see that?
Yes.
Great.
Wonderful.
We have a short presentation, and then I'm happy to take your questions. The Office of the Mayor, as you know, is a small team led by the mayor himself. Our mission is to support his initiatives, working closely with the CEO's office and all the operating departments. Obviously, the last year has been dominated by the pandemic, and so our key initiatives going forward are to continue our recovery, maintain fiscal financial stability, promote economic development and growth, and also continue our efforts to make our community safer. Organizational structure, if you may recall, last year we moved some positions over to the COO's office when CEO Montanez was nominated for the permanent position. Right now, our office is the mayor, myself, Janice Castle, as well as the community liaison position in our office. And then Kayla Riasco, Gabriella, and then one vacant position in the mayor's administration. The community liaison position, which had previously been filled by Luz Holmes, had been vacant. Janice has made an offer in that position. We hope to bring that person on board shortly, and I will touch on that again briefly. In terms of fiscal 21 highlights, in some ways you've already seen the highlights throughout the course of the budget presentations. As you know, the mayor is a frenetic worker, working closely with our department heads day in and day out, and so many of their priorities, his priorities, have been reflected in their presentations. I thought it might be helpful to talk very big picture about our response to the pandemic. The two tools we've had to combat the pandemic initially was testing, and then more recently has been vaccines. The mayor has been working daily on those two sort of big picture priorities. And so I thought that it might be helpful just to focus on those two. When it comes to testing, hopefully you all have experienced this, but we have developed in partnership with our hospitals, with the state, with many other partners, what we believe is the most easy to access and comprehensive set network of testing facility access points that you'll find anywhere, and that's reflected in the numbers. Hartford residents have received about 390,000 coronavirus tests. That's higher than any municipality in the state. Since January or so, we've had the vaccine effort ongoing. We've tried to mirror our effort on testing when it comes to vaccines, in that our mission is to reduce barriers to access and to make sure we're doing everything we can to educate our residents about the need to get the vaccine. There's good news and bad news. The good news is that when it comes to our seniors, those who are 65 plus, almost 86% of our seniors have been vaccinated. That's the highest percentage of the major cities in the state. The bad news is that a very low percentage of our under 45 population have been vaccinated. That's about a quarter, and we have a lot more work to do there. At this point, it's not really a question of access, because they're, I think, approaching or at least half a dozen, walk-up, no appointment necessary clinics across the city. We saw a pretty dramatic decrease in demand for the vaccine following the Johnson & Johnson pause. And since then, our health department has been working to gin up that demand, and there's a lot of work left to be done. Moving on, one of the other functions of our office is legislative work at the city council level, which you all know well. Kayla Riasco leads that work in our office, working with our departments to produce council items, to produce ordinance changes, resolutions, et cetera. That's one aspect. The other aspect is state policy advocacy. Every year we advocate for a number of changes in policy at the state level. This year, our priorities have been getting additional pilot funding, which is something that in past years we haven't had much momentum for. This year we might be able to get something across the line. Clean slate legislation, pedestrian safety legislation, marijuana legalization, the CPC legislation that the city council or some members of this city council were responsible for adopting at the local level, where it was recently passed by one body at the state level, and we're hopeful that it'll be enacted into law. As you know, there was an effort to expand access to the ballot box, particularly when it comes to early voting. That looks like it'll be enacted as well. And then the zoning reform to increase both the amount of housing and increase the diversity of housing in suburban communities, I think is still an active issue with the legislature, although I don't know. I couldn't put a percentage on it in terms of how likely that is to be enacted. I will take this opportunity to address the question earlier about legislative advocacy. Legislative advocacy has been a budget line in the city budget for several years. We have not used it extensively. This year, we contracted with Strategic Outreach Services to represent us at the legislature, in addition to the mayor's sort of constant advocacy work. They are primarily focused on pilot funding and on marijuana legalization, and their work was, because in some ways the pandemic made the legislative session easier to access because everything was online. In other ways, it made it more challenging to keep track of things because so much of the conversation and so much of the work of the legislature happens not at informal hearings, but in meetings and in conversations that generally take place at the Capitol building. In this case, they took place over the phone. They took place in small groups, and so has been helpful to have legislative advocacy services on tap for us. Sort of moving on to the work that has already begun, but that will be the meat of next year, is number one, the American Rescue Plan. The city council and our administration are used to the need for fiscal discipline. We are not used to receiving and devising and implement and getting out the door the kind of significant resources the American Rescue Plan provides. As you know, the mayor's been working closely with all of you to determine how we're going to spend that funding. And I think that in terms of the process we have in place, where we are ahead of many other communities. That process, I know the city council is working on, and hopefully will bring to some finality in the coming weeks, and then it'll be a question of implementing that, and that'll be a whole of city government effort. Second of all, during his state of the city, and then since then, two of the mayor's priorities is sort of in the immediate term and the early parts of the next fiscal year over the summer are, number one, ensure that aside from the academic enrichment and catch up that our young people in the city need, we need to make sure that we're expanding access to non-academic enrichment. And that's been one focus of the spring and into the summer, led primarily by the COO. And then second of all, ensuring that now that our vaccination rates, at least overall in the state, are better, and the restrictions are lifting, almost all of them are lifting effective next Wednesday, ensuring that our arts and cultural activities return this summer, both to help our economy, but also just to help our people, help our community recover. From a budgetary perspective, it's a very similar budget to last year. There are a couple of changes. On the general fund side, there's a 7% increase. That is due to two things. Number one, that is due to the community liaison position I referenced earlier, there's a small increase in the budgeted figure for that position. And that's the reason for that change is that the requirements for that position are the person has to have a bachelor's degree. And second of all, just from a substantive perspective, their duties include sort of a wide range of functions within 311, including making sure residents are connected to critical programs that save them money, like Operation Fuel, like the Larrabee Fund, et cetera. And so there's a small adjustment upward that actually allowed us to recruit a very strong candidate who will be coming on board shortly. Second of all, the other salary change is in the chief of staff position. The chief of staff position has a higher budgeted number for next year, and that's primarily due to the fact that I anticipate vacating the position over the summer. Some of you may know I've been here for 4 years. I initially planned to stay for 1 or 2 years. I planned to leave last year. The mayor had asked me to stay on, and I of course did, and was proud to work on so much pandemic-related work over the last year, but decided that it's probably a good time to move on. And so there's a salary increase associated with that, just to give the mayor flexibility to fill that position and recruit as strong a candidate as possible. There's also a change in grant funding. That change is driven, I think, solely because of Janice Castle worked with the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving to expand the Love Your Block program. We announced a few weeks ago. You may recall that expansion is expansion of programming, and it's obviously that programming needs grant support. So that Love Your Block grant, Love Hartford grant, accounts for the increase in grant receipts. With that, thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that thorough, excellent presentation, Boz. And personally, I want to thank you for going above and beyond and being so passionate about getting the vaccinations out in the city of Hartford. And yes, and within the communities of colors. I know I've gotten texts from you Saturdays, Sundays. We have 2 vaccines left, to try to get someone to take them. So we are grateful to have you, and I wish you the best of luck in your new endeavors. Sad that you're leaving us, but support you 100%. Councilwoman Rossetti.
Thank you. I like how you slipped that in there too, Boz. I like how you just kind of, it was like, what did you just say? I'm going to say everything, then I'm going to say that, and then I'm just going to keep going. Very clever. I just want to speak to something that happened early on, and I think your guidance, persistence, and just embracing it really changed what happened, and I have appreciated it since that day. I think anyone here will understand, council colleagues will understand that there used to be kind of a, hodgepodge on how we got information. And something, I don't even remember now what had happened. And I remember talking to council president, I said, I don't ever want to be in that position again. And Voss, you made it your mission or whatever you did. And we have since then received everything in a way that doesn't put us in that position timely. We understand things, we get information, we get a heads up. And you know what? I have really, really appreciated that. And I just want you to know how much it's really meant to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I think speaking broadly, I think one of the challenges in any sort of government, this is the only government job I've ever had, but in the experience I have is communicating quickly is more challenging than it sounds. And so we try to be responsive as we can, and we'll continue to try to do that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rossetti. Councilman Sanchez.
Yes, I want to echo Councilwoman Rossetti's comment. Boz, you're the man. You're the man. You kept us focused on what's going on. You made sure we received the information that's needed and on a timely basis. And that was one of the most difficult issues. As you know, I'm in my first year of the second term, right? So you know, that is one of the issues I've always had is when we're receiving. I'm sorry about that. Is when we're receiving information, and I will say you have definitely turned that around. Also, I just want to ask you something, and I apologize for the background noise. Give me 1 second. So just one last thing. Now, I just want to know how to pronounce. I'm a person that would love to learn how to pronounce your name. Is it Vasim Srivastava?
Councilman Sanchez reading his name, trying to pronounce it. So I'm glad you asked that.
Not too far off. Vasisht Srivastava.
Vasisht. Thank you so much. I appreciate
I'll stay
it.
with Vaz. Thank you, Councilman Sanchez. Councilman Gale?
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Vaz. And so it got kicked down the road to you. And I guess you sort of answered that one of the lobbyists we used was a group named Strategic Partners. And I'm just wondering, is that who the city's lobbyist was? Because I thought we had somebody in Washington also. And so
sure. So the prior administration had a lobbyist in Washington. I believe that contract carried over, I think perhaps for 6 months of the mayor's first term. Since then, we have not had a lobbyist in Washington. I know that the mayor was contemplating the need for that given the shift in administration, but we have not executed any contract for that. The contract I referred to, Strategic Outreach Services, was for the state legislative process over the last 6 months.
And that's our only lobbyist then?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Going once? Twice?
Nope.
Majority Leader Clark has popped up on the screen.
Thank you, Madam President. To you, boss. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for a great presentation. I just wanted to know regarding the honorariums that was listed into the budget. Were you able to find that budget line item?
Yes. Hold on. Let me pull it up here. So within the so that line item on the budget book is 29-2, and it's within non-operating expenditures. I will follow up with the CFO. I believe that should be that is an error, and we should correct that. But you're right; it is listed in the budget book.
Thank you for that. So yeah, I will. We can touch base with Ms. Hockenhall about that. Just wanted some clarification regarding that. And
Yep.
For all those that may not know what I'm referring to, is that in that on that budget page is a list of honorariums. And as you recall, we had a conversation, discussion last year during the budget process on wanting to pay or will give a stipend to certain members of boards and commissions, which the opinion was given that it was not legally possible to do so, and it is listed in this recommended budget as a line item. So I just brought that to the mayor's office attention for some clarification.
If I may, Majority Leader, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but on page 38 of our budget book, there is a line item of $5,000 for honorariums. And if that's what you're referring to, that is not about boards and commissions. That was put in to pay for the troubadour, the poet laureate, the commentator, I'm forgetting the rest of them, but we have now adopted up to 6 honorary positions, although only one of them is funded right now, the poet laureate, but that was $1,000 a year for each one of them. That's what that budget item honorariums refers to.
I have a quick question on that question, which is, wasn't that honorarium specifically for, or wasn't that listed for last year for boards and commissions to be able to fundraise?
No, not the particular line item I'm referring to on page 38. If you go back to the financial resolutions that we passed, it was a very specific financial resolution, and it was I actually think we put in for $6,000 to fund all 6 positions, and the mayor cut it down by 1,000 and made it 5.
5,000.
But I'm pretty sure. I mean, we can get the answer back from Jen.
That is correct.
Oh yeah, I remember the troubadour one. I recall that, but I'm thinking back that we had said we would allow for fundraising of boards and commissions.
That is correct. There was a resolution that we passed. I'm not sure, but I can do the research to locate it and then share it with the council.
That wouldn't come out of general fund, though, in any event.
I definitely want to check the legality of the ability for boards and commission to fundraise.
So I think that there are 2 issues that we'll follow up to clarify this point about the honorariums. I may have misunderstood, and it sounds like Councilman Gale actually has the right information there. So we'll confirm that. And then similarly on the fundraising, I mean, I know that boards and commissions are allowed to fundraise, although anything they receive must be accepted through the council process.
Yeah, I just want to add to that conversation is that last year when I proposed the idea around stipends for the boards and commissions, it was not allowed via the charter. So It is something that we want to bring up via the charter process this year. So.
Correct. Okay, we'll wait on our response to all the questions from our CFO. Are there any other questions for Voss? Any other questions? There being none, Voss, thank you so much for your presentation. That concludes our public hearings for budget FY 2021-2022. I do personally want to thank Jeff Holland for his tremendous work and always being an open line to City Council, providing us training, being our back and call. We really appreciate everything that you do, as well as David Grant. Thank you for going above and beyond. Always there for all council. We really appreciate you. And to the rest of the staff, thank you all. Have a nice evening. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye.